Hello, ninth grade distance learners. All right, let's get started on our third poem, Slam, Dunk, and Hook by Yusuf Komanyaka, fun name to say. And this poem is for all you sports fans out there, okay? Fast breaks, layups. With Mercury's insignia on our sneakers, we outmaneuvered the footwork of bad angels. Nothing but a hot swish of strings like silk 10 feet out. In the roundhouse labyrinth our bodies created, we could almost last forever, poised in midair like storybook sea monsters. A high note hung there a long second, off the rim. We corkscrew up and dunk balls that exploded the skullcap of hope and good intention. Lanky, all hands and feet, sprung rhythm. We were metaphysical when girls cheered on the sidelines. Tangled up in a falling, muscles were a bright motor double flashing to the metal hoop nailed to our oak. When Sonny Boy's mama died, he played non-stop all day, so hard our backboard splintered. Glistening with sweat, we rolled the ball off our fingertips. Trouble was there, slapping a blackjack against an open palm. Dribble, drive to the inside, and glide like a sparrowhawk. Layups. Fast breaks. We had moves we didn't know we had. Our bodies spun on swivels of bone and faith through a lyric Slipknot of joy, and we knew we were beautiful and dangerous. Okay, so if you weren't able to tell immediately, this poem is about basketball. And you can probably tell it is a much more modern poem as well. This is quite a difference from what we saw yesterday with Wordsworth's I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, where you've got the very steady rhyme scheme. You have stanzas that have the exact number, of lines. This one is much more free form, right? So you can even tell just by looking at it on the page. And a lot of the lines sort of run into the next to create a more continuous feel. Okay, so let's talk about what it means. Some of these terms, if you are not a basketball fan, you might want to look up, or look up a little video so you can see what it looks like with the fast breaks and layups. Get a friend who plays basketball to explain it to you. Those are just terms for what's happening on the basketball court. And then with Mercury's insignia on our sneakers. Okay, so if you've got Mercury there, that's an illusion. Okay, remember that an illusion is a reference to something in literature or culture that they expect you to know. Mercury is the Roman name for Hermes. Do you remember Hermes from the Odyssey? He is the messenger god, okay? And so he's often depicted with wings on his feet. So I guess the sneakers they're talking about might have wings on them or something like that. A little symbol, like how the Nike sneakers have, those swoosh, the just do it, okay? So they had these sneakers, and they felt like they were outmaneuvering the footwork of bad angels. So maybe that's the opposing team, they feel like they're outmaneuvering them. And then nothing but a hot swish of strings like silk 10 feet out. So obviously 10 feet away, they shoot, and it's just swish right through the net, right? And so notice that series of S's there. What is that called? Do you remember? That's alliteration. It's hard to write with my finger. I need to get a stylus. So that is alliteration. And the point of it, too, is to give you that sense. The word swish, of course, is onomatopoeia. To give you that sense of the sound of the ball just swish right through the net. Okay? In the roundhouse labyrinth, our bodies created. So, in the roundhouse, which is the part under the goal, again, that's another term you can look up for basketball, their bodies created almost a labyrinth. And if you think about the last basketball game you saw, it is almost like that. It's almost like they're trying to weave through the bodies of the opposing team, to go up and make the shot or whatever. I'm realizing right now I really should have made Major Cook do this. He is much more adept at basketball than I am. So anyway, that's That's what that part's talking about. And they felt like they could almost last forever. And you're still in the young age, but this speaker of the poem is obviously older looking back because he's using past tense. And so when you get to be my age, you're going to remember how much energy it felt like you had when you were young. Things seem a lot tougher the older you get. And so, yeah, when you're young, you know, looking back on it, you're like, wow, I had so much energy. You know, I could play outside for hours and hours without getting tired, you know, and then as you get older, that gets tougher. So they felt like they could almost last forever. And I wish you could see right now the poised in midair like storybook sea monsters. I picture that like, you know how in a basketball game when somebody shoots, especially like a three-pointer from a distance, and sometimes they kind of keep their arm up there, you know, like they shoot the ball, roll it off their fingertips, and they sort of keep their arm up there. So if you put your arm up right now and it kind of like creates, you know, a curve with your hand, that almost looks like the Loch Ness Monster. You know, that's what I picture there for that part, the storybook sea monsters. It almost looks like a monster rising up out of the sea as they just sort of poise there in midair. They stop almost and seem to hang there for a minute after they shoot the ball, waiting to see if it goes in. And he describes that as being like a high note that hung there for a long second. And it does sort of seem like that sometimes when you're watching the game. Sometimes because basketball is a very fast-paced game, but there are times, especially right after somebody shoots, where it seems like it sort of pauses for a minute. And everything just is sort of still and hangs there. So then he says, off the rim. Again, of course, you picture the ball bouncing off the rim. He said, we'd corkscrew up and dunk balls that exploded the skull cap of hope and good intention. So you can really picture them like, you know, the corkscrew like turning as they go up and maybe dunking it behind their heads. Just a great shot. He describes, the speaker describes him and his friends as being lanky and all hands and feet, which is how teenagers are sometimes described, especially the younger years where you still, you know, you've had such a growth spurt that your body has grown so quickly, it's almost like your coordination hasn't kept up with it. And he describes them as being sprung rhythm, which is actually a poetry term that Gerard Manley Hopkins coined to be a certain type of meter that he created, where it's not a steady meter. Instead of just being like unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, like iambic pentameter, it might be unstressed, unstressed, stressed, 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 unstressed, like it goes back and forth. And so if you think about it, that is a good description for the tempo of a basketball game, because it's not consistent. It's not like, you know, for instance, a marathon where somebody's going to get into a groove and it's going to be a very steady beat. It's a lot of changing of the tempo. He says we were metaphysical when girls cheered on the sideline. So they almost felt like gods, you know, when people were cheering for them. And then he says, tangled up in a falling, muscles were a bright motor, double flashing to the metal hoop nailed to our oak. So, you know, sometimes they'll all get tangled up under the basketball goal and just, you know, like fall, but their muscles keep going like a motor. Again, that sense of not getting tired, of having all this energy. And then he mentions the metal hoop nailed to the oak. I have a very clear image of that, because where I grew up in Crawford County out in the middle of the woods, a lot of people didn't even have paved, you know, driveways and stuff like that. So a lot of my friends did have basketball goals literally just nailed to a tree. That was a common thing, you know, sometimes even just the hoop part, you know, the backboard would be the tree itself. And a lot of times since they were outside, they would have chains, instead of the net. So yeah, I have a very clear image of that. So obviously this is our first idea that we've gotten, that this is not maybe a school game, but he's talking more so about like pickup games, you know, in the neighborhood, where he and his friends would get together and play. And then the tone really changes just for this one sentence, these little, you know, few lines here. He says, when Sonny Boy's mama died, he played nonstop all day, so hard our backboard splintered. So they obviously did have a backboard. So, you know, the tone has been, just very upbeat. He's very nostalgic. He is enjoying looking back on what was obviously a very pleasant time, when he was younger, playing basketball with his friends. But this is a memory of how playing basketball sometimes was not just for fun. Maybe it was more cathartic. Catharsis is to kind of like get emotions out. Think it might be something a lot of us could kind of be in touch with right now. Because, we're all kind of chained inside doing our work, doing our distance learning, but sometimes to deal with anxiety or strong emotions or something like that, you got to move. You got to go for a run or go shoot some basketballs or, do an exercise video or something like that. So it's kind of a very common thing that sometimes when we have very strong emotions, it's almost like they're too much for our mind and our body to handle, so we have to have that movement to sort of cathartically release that feeling. And so obviously Sonny Boy would be one of his friends, and when his mom died, he went out and played nonstop all day. Which at first, if you think about it, you might be like, oh, the guy's mom just died, why is he outside playing basketball? But I think if you look at it from the sense of, wow, how difficult that would be, and you got to find some way to deal with the emotions and the feeling. And so he was playing almost maybe out of anger. I mean, he played so hard his backboard splintered, and we do sometimes get angry when people die because they're taken away from us, and they're taken away too soon. So I think that makes a lot of sense there. And then he switches right back into the, more nostalgic tone of talking about how they would be glistening with sweat, rolling the ball off our fingertips. Another really good image. You can really see that. He says trouble was there slapping a blackjack against an open palm. So I kind of picture that as being, that there was trouble in their neighborhood. There was stuff they could have gotten into, whether it was gambling or, whatever it might be. But they kept themselves busy playing basketball. And you may have seen some like documentaries or commercials about that. I know Denzel Washington has spoken greatly about how much the Boys and Girls Club meant to him growing up, because it gave him a safe place to go. It gave him an outlet. They often have a lot of sports and things for people to do. And so, that's kind of what he's saying, is that maybe the basketball games kind of kept them a little bit protected from some of that because they had something else to focus on. So then he goes back to describing the game: dribble, drive to the inside, and glide like a sparrowhawk. And again, you can picture some of this. If you Google just a little bit of a basketball game or something, you can really sort of see what he's talking about. He repeats layups, fast breaks. He said we had moves we didn't know we had. I love that line because it reminds me so much of when my boys were playing soccer, and one of their friends, it was just a wild shot. You know how in basketball sometimes you'll see somebody throw the ball from like a crazy distance away, and you're like, they're never going to make it, but then it goes in and everybody loses their mind. Well, my boys were playing soccer, and one of their good buddies just took a wild kick like that. Like the ball was coming towards him. He literally was like parallel in the air and kicked at the ball, and it went in the daggone goal. We all lost our minds. So, it's that sometimes you do something in a game or, with your sport or whatever, and after you do it, you're like, wow, I didn't know I could do that. May never be able to do it again. But, I think that we had moves we didn't know we had. When you're young, you really do, you're willing to try it. You'll throw yourself after a ball, or, when you get my age, you're a lot more concerned about breaking something, so you're not as fearless. But he remembers them being young and just trying stuff and having moves that they didn't even know that they could do. And I like that next line too. It ties in with that. Our bodies spun on swivels of bone and faith. So again, that faith in their bodies. You're not going to fully understand that until you get older, because right now you still have it. But when you get older and stuff starts, hurting more, and, you sit down wrong and, hurt your back, you really don't have that faith anymore. You have a lot more fear. I see people at the gym doing stuff that I'm like, okay, I'm not doing that. I could fall and hurt myself. But when I was younger, I would have been right there with them, So I really like that line about bone and faith. And through a lyric, Slipknot of joy. And if you don't know what a slipknot is, look that up. That's cool to do with a rope or some kind of cord. And so it was just joyful, this time of playing ball and getting out there and having fun with friends. And he said, we knew we were beautiful and dangerous. And I like that ending too, because, beautiful in a sense, not like, maybe it's Maybelline, not something like that, but beautiful just in the power of our bodies and what we're able to do, and, just the sports that we're able to play and the things we're able to enjoy, and dangerous, I guess, maybe to the opposing team, whoever they're playing. So, let me see if I can, erase some of this. Okay, come on thing. Let's talk about what, we see as some of the primary literary elements here. Okay? Hopefully you, as you were going through, since we did not have this one in Common Lit, hopefully you went through and marked a few as you were in there. One of the big ones that I like to talk about with this poem is imagery. I think that the poet does an excellent job of giving us a lot of images that we can very clearly see. And not just static images, but images of movement. You could almost see it as like a series of video clips. And so I've pointed out several as we went through. You can think about your own as well. Maybe put stars by the places that you feel like the images really come through, something you can really picture. One for me is definitely that, poising in midair like storybook sea monsters. I can really see that, as well as rolling the ball off fingertips. And so then another one we've already kind of talked about briefly was the onomatopoeia, which, you've got that swish of strings like silk, and then you've got slapping a blackjack. So there's a lot of different words in here where you can really kind of hear the sounds as well, which I think is very well done, how he's not only giving you the visuals, but he's giving you some of the sounds as well. And then another one that I really like to talk about with this one is the meter. It's, as we said, it's not steady. It's not a certain number of syllables per line. But if you look at it, it goes from very short and choppy, like fast breaks, layups, and then a longer. With Mercury's insignia on our sneakers, we outmaneuver the footwork of bad angels. And it does that several times throughout. Like there's another part where it says like off the rim, or let's see. You've got the layups and fast breaks down here again. And to me, I don't know if this is what the poet intended, but it really seems like the meter, the tempo of the poem mimics a basketball game, because you have, times where everybody's under the basketball goal and it's short, choppy movements and stuff like that. And then somebody will break away and go for the, get the ball, steal the ball and go for the other side. And so then it's longer and like everyone's kind of like moving down from one end of the court to the other. And then it'll be back under one of the goals, and, like short, choppy movements. You hear the sneakers squeaking and all of that. So I think it's pretty neat how the meter of this poem really kind of seems to mimic an actual basketball game. I think that was very cleverly done. So, of course, as I've said before, those are definitely not the only 3 literary elements, so feel free to write down some other ones. Talk about the tone. As I mentioned when I was going through it, it is possible to have more than one tone in a poem. It can switch, as we saw this one do. I hope things are going well for you. Remember, you do not have to send a picture of your poetry analysis sheet to me. I'm going to check that whole packet when we get back. Okay? So, y'all have a good one.